The grand hall of the Zorathian palace shimmered under the glow of crystalline chandeliers. Queen Arindra stood tall on her obsidian throne, her silver hair cascading down her back like molten moonlight. Her piercing violet eyes scanned the room before settling on her daughter, Princess Lizira. Lizira sat stiffly in a chair carved from polished starstone, her slender hands gripping its edges as though it might save her from what was coming next. Today was the day she would leave everything behind. For centuries, the Zorathians had watched humanity grow, from primitive beings huddled around fires to explorers venturing into space. Now, with Earth's leaders eager to forge alliances, the Queen had decided that peace could only be secured through sacrifice, and who better to offer than her own daughter? To the Zorathians, this act wasn't cruel. It was strategic, a gesture of goodwill meant to ensure their survival against the volatile humans they feared so deeply. But no one asked Lizira how she felt about being offered like an object wrapped in silk. All her life, she'd been taught to fear humans. Her tutors painted them as monsters, creatures without honor or restraint, driven by greed and violence. They spoke of wars fought over land and resources, of cities reduced to ash by weapons too terrible to imagine. So when her mother announced her role as the ambassador bride for humanity's chosen leader, terror gripped her heart. "Do not shame us, Lizira," Queen Arindra said, her voice cold yet firm. "You will go to Earth and represent our people with dignity." Lizira wanted to protest, to scream that she didn't want this future, but she knew better. Defying the Queen was unthinkable. Instead, she nodded silently, her golden eyes filled with dread. Hours later, she stood inside a gleaming transport pod, surrounded by artifacts symbolizing Zorathian culture. A holographic map displayed Earth's blue-green sphere spinning slowly in the void of space. As the pod prepared for launch, Lizira stared at the image, trying to reconcile her fear with curiosity. What would these humans look like? Would they really treat her as a gift, or something worse? Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Elias Venn adjusted his glasses nervously as he read the official letter delivered to his doorstep. He was just an astrophysicist, not someone accustomed to fame or attention. Yet here he was, selected by lottery to receive the alien princess. "I must be dreaming," he muttered aloud, pacing his small apartment cluttered with books and research papers. His mind raced with questions. Why him? What did humanity expect him to do with an extraterrestrial royal? Still, despite his anxiety, a spark of excitement flickered within him. This was history in the making, and he couldn't deny the allure of meeting someone entirely different from himself. At dawn, Elias arrived at the designated landing site, a quiet forest clearing surrounded by towering trees. Soldiers and scientists bustled nearby, setting up equipment to monitor the arrival. But Elias barely noticed them. His gaze remained fixed on the sky, waiting for the moment when two worlds would collide. When the transport pod descended, glowing softly like a fallen star, Elias felt his breath catch. The door slid open, revealing a figure cloaked in shimmering robes. Before he could step forward, a deafening pulse of sound knocked him off his feet. When he looked up again, the princess was gone, vanishing into the woods like a ghost. Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. This wasn't going to be easy. The forest was alive with sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant chirping of birds, and the soft crunch of twigs underfoot. But to Princess Lizira, every noise felt like a threat. Her heart pounded as she sprinted through the dense underbrush, her shimmering robes catching on branches and tearing slightly. She didn't care about the damage. Survival was all that mattered now. Her mind raced with images of the human who had approached her pod. Tall, pale-skinned, with dark hair and glasses perched on his nose, he looked harmless enough at first glance. But appearances could deceive. Hadn't her tutors warned her? Humans were cunning predators, capable of masking their true nature until it was too late. That man, Dr. Elias Venn, according to the files sent by Earth's leaders, had been calm, almost gentle. But Lizira couldn't shake the feeling that his presence meant danger. She paused behind a thick tree trunk, pressing her back against the bark as she caught her breath. Her skin shifted colors instinctively, blending into the mossy green around her. It was one of her species' many adaptations for survival, but here on this unfamiliar planet, it only added to her sense of vulnerability. Every shadow seemed darker, every movement more menacing. Back at the clearing, Elias groaned as he picked himself up off the ground. The sonic pulse emitted by the princess had left his ears ringing and his head throbbing. He glanced around, searching for any sign of her, but she was nowhere to be seen. The soldiers stationed nearby rushed toward him, weapons drawn. "Sir, are you injured?" one of them asked gruffly. "I'm fine," Elias replied, brushing dirt off his jacket. "But we need to find her. She's scared." "Scared or not, she's dangerous," another soldier interjected. "We don't know what she's capable of." Elias frowned. While he understood their caution, he couldn't help but feel uneasy about treating the princess like an enemy combatant. This wasn't some hostile alien invader. It was a young woman thrust into an unknown world without warning. If they handled this poorly, humanity might lose its chance at peace before it even began. "We'll proceed carefully," Elias said firmly, taking charge despite his lack of military training. "No aggressive actions unless absolutely necessary." "Understood." The soldiers exchanged skeptical glances, but nodded reluctantly. With that, the group set out into the woods, following faint traces of disturbance left by Lizira's flight. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Lizira moved stealthily, using her enhanced senses to avoid detection. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she ignored it, focusing instead on finding shelter. Just as despair started to creep in, she stumbled upon a small stream bordered by wildflowers. Kneeling beside the water, she cupped her hands and drank deeply, savoring the cool liquid. As she rose to leave, something caught her eye. A tiny object half buried in the mud near the bank. Curious, she picked it up and examined it closely. It was a child's toy, brightly colored and shaped like a smiling animal. Though crude compared to Zorethian craftsmanship, there was something undeniably endearing about it. For the first time since arriving on Earth, doubt crept into Lizira's thoughts. Could these humans truly be as monstrous as she'd been taught? Unbeknownst to her, Elias and the others were closing in. Moving quietly, Elias spotted a flash of iridescent fabric between the trees. He signaled for the soldiers to hold back and stepped forward cautiously. "Princess Lizira," he called softly, keeping his voice low and non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you. Please, let me explain." Lizira froze, gripping the toy tightly in her hand. Part of her wanted to run again, but another part, a smaller, braver part, urged her to listen. Slowly, hesitantly, she turned to face him. Elias held up both hands to show he was unarmed. "My name is Elias. I'm the person your people sent you to meet. I know this must be overwhelming for you, but I promise, I'm not your enemy." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to Elias's surprise, Lizira lowered her guard ever so slightly. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for signs of deceit. What she found there gave her pause, not malice, but genuine concern. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had misjudged him. The forest seemed endless, its towering trees casting long shadows that danced in the late afternoon light. Princess Lizira moved like a ghost, her shimmering skin blending seamlessly with the dappled greens and browns around her. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. She had spent hours evading the humans tracking her, relying on instincts honed by years of survival training back on Zorethia. Yet, no matter how far she ran or how carefully she hid, the sounds of pursuit never faded completely. Elias and his team weren't giving up. Lizira crouched behind a cluster of ferns, her sharp ears picking up faint voices in the distance. The soldiers were growing louder, their boots crunching twigs and leaves as they closed in. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Fear would only cloud her judgment. Instead, she focused on what she knew. These humans were persistent, yes, but clumsy. They moved too loudly, gave away their positions too easily. If she could keep her wits about her, she might outlast them. But then there was Elias, the one who confused her most. Unlike the others, he didn't shout orders or trample through the underbrush without care. He moved quietly, almost reverently, as if he respected the forest itself. And when he spoke, his voice carried none of the hostility she expected from a predator. It unnerved her. How could someone so gentle be part of a species her people deemed dangerous? Back at the edge of the clearing, Elias studied the ground intently. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, and faint footprints marked Lizura's trail. He pointed them out to the soldiers, urging caution. "She's scared," he reminded them. "If we push too hard, she'll bolt again." One of the soldiers scoffed. "Scared or not, she attacked us first. We can't afford to go soft now." Elias clenched his jaw, but said nothing. He understood their frustration. It wasn't easy chasing an alien who could disappear into thin air, but he also knew violence wouldn't solve anything. This mission wasn't just about retrieving the princess. It was about proving humanity's worth to an entire species. If they failed here, the consequences could ripple across galaxies. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Lizura found refuge in a hollowed-out tree trunk, wrapping her torn robes tightly around herself for warmth. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but exhaustion weighed heavier. Closing her eyes, she tried to steady her breathing, focusing on the rhythmic chirping of crickets nearby. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by flashes of home and the faces of those who had sent her here. Just before dawn, Elias spotted movement near a rocky outcrop. Squinting through binoculars, he saw Lizura emerge cautiously from her hiding spot. She looked weaker than before, her once pristine robes now tattered and stained. For a moment, guilt washed over him. Was this really how humanity wanted to introduce itself, by chasing her like prey? "Hold your positions," he whispered to the soldiers. Ignoring their protests, he stepped forward alone, hands raised in surrender. "Princess Lizura," he called softly, his voice barely audible over the rustling wind. "I'm not here to hurt you." Lizura spun around, her golden eyes wide with alarm. Instinctively, she raised a hand, ready to unleash another sonic pulse. But something stopped her, a flicker of hesitation, perhaps even recognition. She remembered the toy she'd found by the stream, the kindness in his tone during their last encounter. Could he truly mean no harm? Elias took another cautious step forward. "You don't have to run anymore, I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you." For several tense seconds, they stared at each other across the distance. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Lizura lowered her hand. Though still wary, she didn't flee. It was a small victory, but enough to give Elias hope. Behind him, the soldiers shifted uneasily, weapons still trained on the princess. One muttered under his breath, "This is insane." Maybe it was, but Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this fragile moment might hold the key to bridging two worlds, or destroying them both. The tension in the air was palpable as Elias stood motionless, his hand still raised to show he meant no harm. Princess Lizura watched him warily, her golden eyes flickering between suspicion and curiosity. The soldiers behind Elias shifted uncomfortably, their weapons glinting in the early morning light. To them, this standoff felt precarious. A single wrong move could escalate into chaos. But Elias refused to budge. He knew that brute force wouldn't win her trust. Only patience might. "Please," Elias said softly, taking another small step forward. "I'm not your enemy." Lizura hesitated, her fingers twitching at her side. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that humanity wasn't the monstrous race she'd been taught to fear. But doubt lingered. Her tutor's warnings echoed in her mind. Humans are cunning. They'll use kindness as a weapon. Still, something about Elias's demeanor struck her differently. There was sincerity in his voice, vulnerability in his posture. He didn't act like someone trying to manipulate her. After what felt like an eternity, Lizera finally spoke. Her words came out haltingly, in broken phrases translated through the universal device strapped to Elias's wrist. "Why? Do you follow me?" Elias exhaled slowly, relief washing over him that she hadn't fled again. "Because I want to help," he replied. "You're scared, and I understand why. But running won't solve anything. Let me explain." For a moment, Lizera considered bolting once more. Every instinct screamed at her to keep moving, to stay hidden. Yet something held her back. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this human was different. Slowly, she nodded, though her body remained tense, ready to react if needed. Realizing he'd gained a sliver of her trust, Elias gestured toward a nearby clearing. "Let's talk somewhere safe, just you and me, no one else." He turned to the soldiers and added firmly, "Stay here. That's an order." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed, lowering their weapons reluctantly. As Elias led Lizera deeper into the forest, he noticed how her skin shifted colors subtly, adapting to her surroundings like a living camouflage. It fascinated him, though he kept his focus on reassuring her. When they reached the clearing, Elias knelt down and placed his hands flat on the ground. "See, no tricks, just us." Lizera studied him carefully, her gaze lingering on his face. For the first time, she noticed details she'd overlooked before, the faint lines around his eyes, the way his glasses slid slightly down his nose when he tilted his head. These imperfections made him seem human, fragile, even. Using gestures and fragmented sentences, Elias began explaining Earth, humanity, and their intentions. He described the lottery system that had chosen him to meet her, emphasizing that it was random, not some sinister plot. He showed her images on his tablet of cities, forests, oceans, and people from all walks of life. Some parts intrigued her, while others filled her with apprehension. In return, Lizera shared fragments of her own world using the translation device. She spoke of Zorathia's crystalline cities, its strict societal rules, and the immense pressure placed on royals like herself. Her voice softened when she mentioned her mother, revealing a complex mix of love and resentment. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the clearing, both realized they weren't so different after all. They were outsiders thrust into roles they hadn't chosen, bound by duty yet yearning for freedom. By the time they parted ways to regroup later, a fragile bond had formed, one built on mutual understanding and tentative trust. But neither knew how long it would last, or whether their fragile connection could withstand the storm brewing beyond the trees. The fragile bond between Princess Lizera and Dr. Elias Venn felt like a delicate thread stretched across an abyss. While their conversations in the forest had opened doors to understanding, the world beyond was far less forgiving. News of Lizera's escape had spread quickly, igniting debates on both Earth and Zorathia. For humanity, this incident became a litmus test for their readiness to coexist with alien life. For the Zorathians, it was a scandal. A royal princess refusing her duty could destabilize centuries of tradition. Back at the remote research facility where Elias had taken Lizera temporarily, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The scientists and military personnel stationed there argued over how to handle her. Some believed she should be treated as a guest, while others insisted she needed stricter supervision. "She's not some wild animal we can tame," Elias snapped during one heated meeting. "If we push too hard, we'll lose whatever progress we've made." But even as he defended her, doubts gnawed at him. Was he doing the right thing? Every decision he made seemed to pull him in opposing directions, between protecting Lizera and answering to those who saw her as little more than a political pawn. For Lizera, the weight of her situation pressed down harder each day. She spent hours alone in her quarters, staring out at Earth's blue skies through reinforced glass windows. Her translator device buzzed occasionally with intercepted transmissions from Zorathia. Through them, she learned of the outrage brewing back home. Extremist factions accused her mother, Queen Narendra, of betraying their people by sending her to Earth. Others demanded her immediate return, claiming humanity would corrupt her. One transmission struck her deeply, a recording of her mother addressing the Zorathian Council. "My daughter is strong," Queen Narendra said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "She will fulfill her role, no matter the cost." Hearing these words broke something inside Lazira. Was she merely a sacrifice, offered up to appease humans, or did her mother truly believe she could bridge two worlds? Her frustration boiled over during a tense conversation with Elias. They sat together in a quiet corner of the facility, surrounded by monitors displaying data about Zorathian culture. When Elias asked her opinion on potential diplomatic strategies, she snapped, "Do you think I care about your plans? Do you think any of this matters to me?" Elias blinked, caught off guard by her sudden anger. "Lazira, No," she interrupted, standing abruptly. "You don't understand. You say you want peace, but all you humans know is control. First my mother sends me here like a gift. Now you expect me to fix everything. What gives you the right?" Her word hung heavy in the air. Elias looked at her, his expression pained. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "We don't have the right. But maybe none of us do. Maybe peace isn't something we're given. It's something we build together." His honesty disarmed her. Slowly, she sank back into her chair, tears welling in her golden eyes. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "If I go back, they'll use me as a symbol. If I stay, they'll call me a traitor." Elias reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on hers. "Then let's find another way. Together." Before either of them could say more, alarms blared throughout the facility. Soldiers rushed past, shouting orders. A group of anti-alien militants had breached the perimeter, intent on taking Lazira by force. Chaos erupted as gunfire echoed outside. Without hesitation, Elias grabbed Lazira's hand and pulled her toward a hidden exit. "Trust me," he urged, his voice firm despite the panic around them. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lazira didn't question his intentions. As they fled into the night, she realized that trust wasn't just a word, it was a choice. And she had chosen him. The forest was darker now, its shadows stretching long and ominous under the pale light of Earth's moon. Elias and Lazira moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves beneath them. Behind them, shouts echoed through the trees as the militants closed in, their flashlights cutting through the gloom like predatory eyes. Every snap of a twig or rustle of bushes sent Lazira's heart racing, but she stayed close to Elias, trusting him in a way she never thought possible. "This way," Elias whispered urgently, pulling her toward a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods. His grip on her hand was firm yet gentle, a reminder that he wasn't going to let anything happen to her. For Lazira, this small act of protection meant more than words could express. It wasn't just about survival. It was about connection, something she had feared she might never find on this strange planet. They eventually reached a secluded cabin tucked away in a clearing. Elias explained it belonged to a colleague who used it for stargazing trips. "We can hide here until things calm down," he said, unlocking the door and ushering her inside. The interior was modest. A single room with a cot, a table, and shelves lined with books. But to Lazira, it felt like a sanctuary. As they settled in, exhaustion began to take its toll. Lazira sat on the edge of the cot, her shimmering robes dulled from days spent running through the wilderness. She stared at her hands, which trembled slightly despite her efforts to steady them. Elias noticed and handed her a glass of water. "You're safe here," he assured her softly. "For now." Lazira nodded but didn't speak. Instead, she looked around the cabin, taking in the unfamiliar sights. The wooden walls, the flickering lantern on the table, the star charts pinned to the ceiling. It all seemed so human, so ordinary, and yet there was beauty in its simplicity, a warmth she hadn't expected. Over the next few days, they talked, really talked, for hours on end. Elias shared stories of his life on Earth, Growing up in a small town, pursuing science because he loved unraveling mysteries, and feeling overshadowed by colleagues who prioritized fame over discovery. In turn, Lizera opened up about her own upbringing, the rigid expectations placed upon her as royalty, the loneliness of being constantly watched, and the fear of disappointing her people. One evening, as they sat side by side on the porch watching the stars, Lizera asked hesitantly, "Do you think we're really so different?" Elias smiled faintly. "Not as much as we'd like to believe," he replied. "Fear makes us see differences where none exist. But when you look past that, we're all just trying to survive, to belong." To demonstrate, he showed her how to read human emotions through facial expressions and tone of voice. In return, Lizera taught him how her bioluminescent markings conveyed feelings, soft glows for calmness, rapid pulses for excitement or distress. They laughed together when Elias accidentally triggered a misinterpretation, causing Lizera's skin to flare bright yellow in mock annoyance. These moments of levity became precious to both of them. For the first time, Lizera felt truly seen, not as a princess or an alien, but as herself. Similarly, Elias found solace in her company, grateful for someone who understood his quiet nature without judgment. But their idyllic refuge couldn't last forever. One morning, drones appeared in the sky, scanning the area systematically. The outside world had caught up with them. As they packed supplies to leave, Lizera turned to Elias with determination in her golden eyes. "Whatever happens next," she said firmly, "we face it together." Elias nodded, resolve hardening within him. Together, they stepped out of the cabin, ready to confront whatever challenges awaited them. Their bond had grown stronger than either could have imagined, proving that even across species, understanding and trust could flourish. The grand chamber where the joint tribunal convened was a stark contrast to the quiet forest cabin Lizera and Elias had left behind. The room was vast, its high ceilings adorned with intricate carvings that represented both Earth's landscapes and Zorathia's crystalline architecture. Rows of dignitaries, human politicians in sharp suits, and Zorathian leaders draped in shimmering robes, sat on either side of a raised platform. At the center stood two chairs, one for Lizera and one for Elias. Their presence here marked the culmination of weeks of chaos, but neither felt prepared for what lay ahead. Lizera wore a traditional Zorathian gown, its iridescent fabric reflecting light like liquid starlight. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of sympathy among the stoic faces. Beside her, Elias adjusted his glasses nervously, feeling out of place in his simple suit. He wasn't a diplomat or a soldier. He was just an astrophysicist who had stumbled into something far bigger than himself. Yet, as he glanced at Lizera, he reminded himself why they were there, to prove that trust could bridge even the widest divides. The proceedings began with Queen Arindra addressing the assembly via hologram. Her voice carried authority as she spoke of the alliance's importance, emphasizing how much rested on this moment. "My daughter is a symbol of peace," she declared, though her tone betrayed hints of regret. "Her actions will determine whether our species can coexist." Then came accusations from both sides. Human officials argued that Lizera's escape reflected poorly on Zorathian intentions, suggesting it undermined their commitment to diplomacy. Meanwhile, Zorathian extremists accused humanity of mistreating their princess, pointing to intercepted footage of her fleeing soldiers as evidence of hostility. The tension in the room grew palpable, each faction digging deeper into their grievances. When it was Lizera's turn to speak, she rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment, silence filled the chamber as all eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from Elias's steady gaze. "I did not come to Earth willingly," she began, her voice clear despite the weight of her words. "I was taught to fear humans, to see them as predators. But I have learned otherwise." She paused, glancing at Elias before continuing. "Dr. Venn has shown me kindness, patience, and respect, qualities my tutors said humans lacked. And while some among you seek conflict, I believe we are capable of more." Her speech shifted to the intercepted transmission she'd heard during her time on Earth. She revealed shocking truths. Militant groups opposed to the alliance had been secretly funded by corrupt officials hoping to incite war. Gasps rippled through the audience as evidence flashed on large screens. Financial records, encrypted messages, and covert operations laid bare for everyone to see. Elias watched in awe as Lizira commanded the room, her vulnerability transforming into power. When she finished speaking, the chamber erupted into murmurs. Even the most skeptical faces softened, moved by her courage and conviction. Finally, Queen Arindra broke the silence. "My daughter speaks wisely," she said, her expression unreadable. "Perhaps it is time we listened, not just to her, but to each other." As the tribunal adjourned temporarily to deliberate, Lizira sank back into her chair, exhausted yet hopeful. Elias leaned closer, whispering, "You were incredible." She managed a small smile. "We still don't know what they'll decide." He nodded grimly. Whatever the outcome, they would face it together. Their bond had already changed the course of history. For better or worse, only time would tell. The tribunal's decision came after hours of heated deliberation. When the chamber doors reopened, the air was thick with anticipation. Lizira and Elias stood side by side, their hands brushing lightly, an unspoken gesture of solidarity. Queen Arindra's holographic form shimmered above the platform as she delivered the verdict in a voice that carried both authority and relief. "The alliance between Earth and Zorithia will continue," she announced, her violet eyes locking onto her daughter. "Princess Lizira has chosen to remain on Earth, not as a gift, but as an ambassador for our people. Her actions have proven that trust can flourish even in the face of fear." A murmur swept through the crowd, blending disbelief with cautious optimism. For Lizira, the weight of her mother's words felt like both freedom and responsibility. She had defied centuries of tradition, choosing her own path rather than submitting to duty. Yet in doing so, she had become a symbol of hope, a living testament to the possibility of unity between species. Elias exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. He glanced at Lizira, who met his gaze with a faint smile. They hadn't won without sacrifice. Political careers had been ruined, extremist factions silenced, but their perseverance had paid off. Humanity and Zorithians were no longer adversaries. They were partners, bound by a shared vision of peace. In the weeks that followed, Lizira settled into her new role as an ambassador. With Elias by her side, she traveled across Earth, meeting leaders, scientists, and ordinary citizens eager to learn about her world. Together, they worked to dispel myths and foster understanding. Schools invited them to speak about interspecies cooperation, while media outlets documented their efforts to bridge cultural gaps. Each interaction brought them closer to their goal, proving that coexistence wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Back on Zorithia, Queen Arindra faced backlash from traditionalists who viewed Lizira's decision as betrayal. But public opinion began to shift as news of Earth's progress reached their planet. Images of Lizira laughing with human children, working alongside scientists, and sharing stories of her culture inspired many Zorithians to reconsider their prejudices. Slowly, the rigid lines dividing their societies began to blur. One evening, months after the trial, Lizira and Elias found themselves standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sky was ablaze with stars, their light reflected in the water below. It was a rare moment of quiet amidst their busy lives, a chance to reflect on how far they'd come. "Do you ever miss home?" Elias asked softly, breaking the silence. Lizira tilted her head, considering the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I found a new home here, with you, with this world. It's not perfect, but it's real." Elias smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You've changed everything, you know that. You've given us a future we didn't think was possible." She shook her head, her golden eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. "Not me. Us. This isn't something one person could do alone." As they stood there, Watching a meteor shower streak across the horizon, Lizira felt a profound sense of peace. The stars no longer seemed distant or unreachable. They were reminders of connection, of bridges built between worlds. Her journey had been fraught with fear, doubt, and danger, but it had also brought her love, friendship, and purpose. And as the waves crashed against the rocks below, echoing their shared resolve, Lizira knew one thing for certain. The bond she and Elias had forged would endure, lighting the way for generations to come. Their story was proof that even in the vastness of space, understanding could take root and grow into something extraordinary.